You already know the deal. I had to follow through on my promise. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference playoff outlook. If we look at the playing tournament side of things, dude, y'all got to look at this, bruh. The race for the sixth seed is a lot closer than you think now. Because if you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, they are number 6 in the Eastern Conference with 43 wins, but they are tied with Toronto. I believe they have the tiebreaker with Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think they do because I think they won their season series. But if Toronto wins their next game, which I'm going to look up their next game right now, these next two games, the Miami Heat will be facing the Toronto Raptors. They'll face them tomorrow, and then they'll face them again Thursday, both at home. I think both of them are winnable games, even though the Heat are tougher than people really give them credit for, but I don't think they're that good to contend in the Eastern Conference. How the hell they even make it into postseason contention every year is amazing. I don't know if it says a lot about Eric Spoelstra or how bullheaded friggin' Pat Riley is. But nevertheless, the Raptors will play the Heat twice, and then they round up their 2025-26 season with a road game against the New York Knicks, and then they host their final regular season home game for the year against the Brooklyn Nets. And then if you look on the Philadelphia 76ers side of things, they do have a light two-game schedule for their last two games, but their next two games are going to be considerably tough because today they face the San Antonio Spurs, who are looking to avenge their loss in Denver in that overtime game this past Saturday. And then the Houston Rockets, I already talked about the Rockets and their schedule and how it impacts the Lakers and the Western Conference and yada, yada, yada. So the next two games are going to be pretty tough, especially that the Sixers are also trying to avenge a really tough loss against the Detroit Pistons, where they got the doors blown off them, man, by Tobias Harris, Dennis Jenkins. They didn't have Cade Cunningham, the Pistons didn't. I know the Sixers didn't have Joel Embiid, but I saw the second half of that game, bruh, and it was bad. 33 points in the second half. No, not in the quarter, not in like 10 minutes or so, all within the second half, aka the final two quarters of that game. It was terrible. Lack of effort, no energy, especially in a game where it could really determine where they could fall when it comes to the play-in. But thankfully, they have the tiebreaker against Toronto. And if you are a Sixer fan, you should be thankful that you have the tiebreaker against the Toronto Raptors. And then they wrap up their schedule with a game against the tanking Indiana Pacers, who will be really good next year, with Tyrese Haliburton and Ivica Zubac coming back. And then they face the Milwaukee Bucks, who are in shambles with the whole Giannis thing. I don't know. I still don't know what's going on over there in Milwaukee. It's so weird. So it's kind of complicated to talk about the matchups in the play-in tournament when it comes to the Eastern Conference. It's not like what I did in yesterday's video where, okay, I'm sure that the Suns are going to be the ones hosting the 7 seed, 8 seed game, whereas it's still up in the air when it comes to Philly and Toronto, because in truth, the Charlotte Hornets are starting to catch up with them, even though they have 36 losses to Toronto and Philly's 35, they have the same amount of wins. So if the Hornets start catching fire, they're gonna be the ones hosting that 7-8 seed game. And depending on what happens within these last 4 games for both Toronto and Philly, Charlotte could leapfrog for the 8 seed, or hell, they could leapfrog to the 7 seed or the 6 seed, excuse me. And then we have to see Toronto and Philly battle it out. But even after all that, I'm just gonna name it off right here. As far as play-in tournament matchups in the Eastern Conference. So let's say the playoffs start or the postseason start today, right? It will be Toronto and Charlotte in the battle for the 7th seed. The Charlotte Hornets have been on fire, man. I have been contemplating on making a video about how good the Charlotte Hornets have been, especially since they started their season 4-14. It looked like another typical Charlotte Hornets season where they're just an absolutely abysmal team that doesn't know what the hell they're doing, and LaMelo Ball hasn't matured, which I'm actually wrong about that. He definitely has matured as an overall player, and he actually is playing competent basketball. Brandon Miller has been really, really good for them. Concanoopel is absolutely lighting up from 3 as a rookie. In my opinion, I wouldn't be mad if he won Rookie of the Year over Cooper Flagg. I know Cooper has scored 95 points within the last 2 games, and that leapfrogged him into Rookie of the Year favorite, or as a Rookie of the Year favorite, excuse me. But what Concanoopel is doing with Charlotte cannot go unnoticed. I know there's VJ Edgecombe. He's been really, really good for the Philadelphia 76ers, but he has such a small sample size because of the fact he has to play behind Tyrese Maxey, and then when they're healthy, Paul George and Joel Embiid. On Toronto's side of things, yes, they have a good team. RJ Barrett has been really good for them. Emmanuel Quickly has been a nice offensive spark off the bench. Brandon Ingram has been a very, very good player for him. The Toronto Raptors, on the other hand, are a really good team. I do like their roster. I've always been a Brandon Ingram fan. RJ Barrett has been really good. Scotty Barnes is an absolute beast. Emmanuel Quickly has been good off the bench. But the problem with the Toronto Raptors, and I've only watched a handful of Raptors games, their offense can really go stale, and no one can really create their shot outside of RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram. And because of the fact they have to rely on those two guys and Scotty Barnes, it can really cause the Raptors to go cold, especially from three. The spacing is very subpar because of the fact there's really no one that could create their own shot outside of BI, RJ, Scotty, a bit of Quickly. Everyone else is just kind of like a spot shooter, or they just move within the flow of the offense. You know what I'm saying? And there's not too much ball movement. And I don't know if that's on Coach Darko Rajakovic, because I think he's a really good coach, and he's done a pretty good job with this Toronto Raptors team this year as opposed to what he had in his first two seasons as the Raptors head coach. But even with that, his offense is just non-existent. And that's why I feel like they're going to struggle in the playoffs mildly if they do get in. And because I feel like Charles Lee runs a better offense with Charlotte, I feel like they could go up to Toronto and upset Toronto and steal the 7th seed from them. Now, let's just say Philly doesn't win out and they get demoted to the play-in tournament and they have to battle for the 7th, 8th seed. If they face Toronto, I think I have a good chance with the Philadelphia 76ers because, yes, I think Nick Nurse is a boneheaded coach that really doesn't know how to coach a basketball team, but he does have two good stars on his team. One is a superstar, one is a star that's past his prime, because, he's never healthy. Even this year when he's healthy, it's just like he's not the same player as he once was back in, let's say 2018-19, right? I'm talking about Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, bottom line. Tyrese Maxey is a superstar that can light up the scoreboard, and Joel Embiid, he's still a really good player. He can still give me 27 and 12, even on bulky knees. Paul George has been playing really well in spite of that ugly Sixer loss last night, or that ugly loss against the Detroit Pistons, I should say. I know PG can be a liability at times, and I know I clown the guy, and I do clown the Sixers for just being the dumbest front office, or for having the dumbest front office, which they still do. But if we just look at a one-game postseason winner-take-all type of game, you know what I'm saying, and it's the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Toronto Raptors, I think Philly will also steal that game in Toronto. Or if they host and Toronto gets demoted to the 8th seed, whatever, what have you. Point is, I have Philly taking the 7th seed. And if the Charlotte Hornets were to face the Toronto Raptors in the play-in tourney for the 7th, 8th seed battle, I think Charlotte has enough to steal that 7th seed if they face them in Toronto if the playoffs started today. Now, if there's a Charlotte-Philadelphia game in the battle for the 7th seed, I think that's a different story because I do think Philly wins that matchup regardless because they do have Joel Embiid. And I don't think the Hornets have really much guys that could stick Joel Embiid. Yeah, they have Diabate, they have Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's also a good rookie, but they ain't Joel Embiid. And I know they have LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and again, the Hornets have a really good squad. I just don't know if they could stick with, not Toronto. I don't know if they could stick with the Philadelphia 76ers with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid in the lineup, in my personal opinion. Now, the 9-10 seed is really not going to matter because I think it's going to be Orlando and Miami. I think Orlando wins that game because the Miami Heat, they really ain't got nothing outside of Norman Powell and Mr. 83 himself, Bam Adebayo. Tyler Hero, Davion Mitchell, yeah, they're good players, but even though Orlando has struggled throughout the season and it looks like they quit on Jamal Mosley and it looks like they're not going to contend at all for any parts of the the Eastern Conference playoffs, I do think they have enough to beat Miami and stay at the number 9 seed. And unfortunately, I think the buck stops with them there because if they face Toronto or Philadelphia or Charlotte in the battle for the 8th seed, I think Orlando loses that game anyway. So then that 9-10 seed battle will be kind of pointless because of the fact, Orlando and Miami, they ain't good, man. Well, they're good, but they ain't good enough. One is a disappointing team. I already touched a bit about the Orlando, or I touched a bit on the Orlando Magic in one of my previous videos. But Miami, it's just, they ain't all that in a bag of chips, and Orlando ain't all that in a bag of chips either. So I think the 9-10 seed battle, unlike the Western Conference, it would be kind of pointless. Now, if things stay the way they are, though, the Knicks would have to face the Philadelphia 76ers. It'll be a rematch of the 2024 first round. This time it'll be a 3-6 matchup, not a 2-7 matchup. I think the Knicks will win it in like 7 games. I know the last time they faced Philly in the playoffs, they won it in 6, but I do think Philly has enough to at least force a game 7. And you also highlight the inconsistencies with the Knicks as well. Mikal Bridges, he can be an offensive liability at times, and there was a long stretch in the season where he has looked like an offensive liability, and his defense wasn't necessarily good enough to make up for his lack of offensive production. Jalen Brunson's still pretty good. OG Anunoby has been really good. Karl-Anthony Towns, he's an interesting case too, because the last time they faced the Sixers in the playoffs, they had Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, my question is, can Karl Towns stick Joel Embiid the way Hartenstein did? Now, even though Joel Embiid had a great series off of one bad knee when he faced the Knicks in the 2024 first round, Isaiah Hartenstein did a pretty good job holding him when it mattered most. And this is also going to be a series where they're going to miss Donte DiVincenzo because remember, they had to trade him and Julius Randle to get Karl Towns. And Donte was huge for the Knicks in that first round series. He hit multiple clutch threes in those playoff games versus Philly. And if you think about it, maybe you have a guy like Mikal Bridges that can light it up. I know they added Landry Shamet, so maybe he could have the Donte-like role. You know what I'm saying? Where he does hit big shots, and then Karl Towns is capable of hitting big-time threes himself. But I feel like Donte changed the dynamic of that entire series with his shot making outside of Brunson. Now, I'm not saying it's like a bad thing for them to have Mikal Bridges and Karl Towns. I just think that without Donte DiVincenzo, who can they really go to have those game-changing threes? You know what I mean? Maybe Karl Towns, maybe Shamet because they're really good. Maybe you play Jose Alvarado a lot more minutes, and then you have Deuce McBride still. But I don't know. And I am not as confident in Karl Towns holding Joel Embiid the way Isaiah Hartenstein did. And that's not saying Cat is a bad defender. It's just that he doesn't have that defensive physicality that Isaiah Hartenstein does. You know what I mean? And that's not a shot at Karl Towns at all. But after all that, no Karl Towns. After all that, I do think the New York Knicks will win their first round matchup as a number 3 seed, no matter who they get the 6 seed, whether that be Atlanta, even though they might stay at the number 5 seed because of how hot they've been since the All-Star break, to be honest, since trading Trae Young. Whether it's them, the Sixers, the Raptors, or the Hornets, I think New York wins their first round matchup no matter who they get. Now, when it comes to the 4-5 matchup, there is a potential matchup between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Atlanta Hawks. Like I said, the Atlanta Hawks have caught so much fire. Jalen Johnson is an absolute stud. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think he's going to win Most Improved Player because, think about this. He went from averaging 9 a game on the Timberwolves last year to averaging 20 a game as one of the primary stars for the Atlanta Hawks. I know, I don't want to compare him to his cousin SGA, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a damn good player, and he's looking like he's a more improved player, and he's just more than a 3-and-D guy. It's just that the teams like the Pelicans, the Timberwolves, and a bit of the Utah Jazz, they just utilize him as a corner shooter, and you're just seeing that Nickeil is more than capable of being more than a 3-and-D player. You know what I'm saying? CJ McCollum has also been a godsend for the Atlanta Hawks too, but he's always been a pro's pro. He's always been a good shot maker, and I do feel like he fits the Quinn Snyder or the newfound Quinn Snyder system in Atlanta a lot more than Trae Young. And Jonathan Kuminga has looked like a solid player off the Atlanta bench. He's not only making his old buddies in Golden State look like absolute morons, Steve Kerr, Brandon Podziemski. Kuminga is also a versatile wing defender, and he provides a lot of athleticism that can complement Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander, Dyson Daniels, Onyeka Okongwu, and Mohamed Gay, and the rest of those guys. Overall, the Hawks have had a great team since the All-Star break, and they could be a dark horse for a Eastern Conference Finals matchup or an Eastern Conference Semifinals matchup, especially if they do defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers in shocking fashion. But even after all that, the Cavaliers roster, I believe, is better than the Atlanta Hawks. And I do think the Cavaliers will win that 4-5 matchup against Atlanta because of the fact, yes, I know of James Harden's shortcomings in the playoffs. I know Donovan Mitchell, even though he is a scoring machine, he does fall short himself. But I do think Cleveland's roster is better. I do think the Cavaliers roster has a much more better fluid offense with James Harden, and they have better depth and spacing. Not to say Atlanta doesn't, but I feel like with James Harden on the squad, he changes so many things for Donovan Mitchell, and he can do a lot of things that Darius Garland couldn't. And I'm not saying Darius Garland was bad on the Cavs. I just think James Harden was the better of the two, which is why the Cleveland Cavaliers traded for him at the trade deadline. I do think Cleveland's front court and Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen will absolutely trample over the front court that Atlanta has, or maybe lack thereof, you can argue, because Jock Landale got hurt because Goga Batadze threw him down because he was just salty that he lost, and they had to lean on guys like Mohamed Gay and Onyeka Okongwu, or Zach Richese and Onyeka Okongwu, which is not a bad thing. It's just that, well, I think I like my chances better with Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. You know what I'm saying? All in all, when it comes to the 4-5 matchup between the Cavs and the Hawks, I will take the Cavs in 7, but I will not be surprised if Atlanta does win that series and shocks the world and beats Cleveland in game 5 or 6, whatever, what have you. Because the Atlanta Hawks, they are a top 5, or I think Run Back NBA said something about them being a top 6 defensive team. They're up there with teams like the Boston Celtics, the OKC Thunder, the Detroit Pistons. You know, they're up there with those guys, and those guys are projected to win the championship. And I think Denver might have slipped their way into a top 5 defense as well with the way they've been playing lately, and then the San Antonio Spurs, obviously. So, all in all, it's going to be a great series. I think that goes to 7, and I do think the Cavaliers will win that matchup. Moving on. Quick little update. The standings have changed a little bit. I know Toronto had a big win last night against Miami. Philadelphia not only lost their game against the Detroit Pistons, but they got embarrassed. Well, I don't want to say they got embarrassed. They kept it close. But in the fourth quarter, they got embarrassed by the San Antonio Spurs. And the Charlotte Hornets, they've won 7 of their last 10, which has been pretty good. But when it comes to the overall 2-7 matchup, whether it's Toronto, Philadelphia, or Orlando, depending on who wins what and where everyone is seated at the end of the season, I don't think it'll matter, because if they face Boston, I think it might be a 4 or 5 game series. I think Boston will make quick work of whoever comes out of the play-in that 2-7 matchup, whether it's the Raptors, whether it's the Sixers, whether it's Orlando. Maybe the Philadelphia 76ers can force a Game 7 against them once again, but even then, it's just like, we already know the outcome. Boston's going to win. And last but not least, let's talk about the potential 1v8 matchup in the first round, which will be the Detroit Pistons versus whoever wins the 8-9 matchup between the Orlando Magic, the Charlotte Hornets, or even the Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors, because the battle for the 6th seed is only separated by 1 game. So who knows who Detroit will see in the playoffs, you know what I'm saying? So if they face Toronto, that's a 4-game sweep. If they face Orlando, I feel like it could go 6, because Orlando's still good defensively, but with how Orlando's season has been going, it's going to be a 5-game route as well. If they face Charlotte, it's also going to be a 5-game route, even though the Charlotte Hornets are pretty good. It's just that, Cade Cunningham and the Pistons, they just have a really good team, and they've proved me wrong. I honestly thought they were going to get exposed, and I literally said in my video talking about the Detroit Pistons got potentially exposed with Cade Cunningham's injury. Cade is going to come back, and the Pistons have been playing really well without him, but overall they do need him for the home stretch. Now, as far as the Philadelphia Pistons matchup goes, I feel like the 76ers do have the best chance to upset the Pistons when healthy, because Joel Embiid, with a healthy Joel Embiid, a healthy Tyrese Maxey, and if Paul George is not a liability, they probably have the best chance to upset the Pistons in the first round. If everything is connected, you know what I'm saying? But that's me betting the world, because I've seen Playoff P, aka Paul George, in the postseason with the Clippers and the OKC Thunder. I do not trust that guy. Yes, I know Paul George was part of that conference finals run with the Clippers when Kawhi Leonard was down. And Podcast P played great in the absence of Kawhi Leonard. Now, it helped that he had guys like Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris Sr., Terrence Mann, who had that 140-point game, and he had Ivica Zubac still healthy for at least a good amount of that Sun series until he eventually went down with injury. But I have to undercut it and say that's also an indictment against Paul George, because that was his only good or his only memorable playoff run ever since he was on the Clippers. You know what I mean? 2024, yeah, he played okay, but he quit on the Clippers, and it was clear as day that he did quit on the team. I saw what he did 2018 Game 6 in Utah when he was on the OKC Thunder. Russell Westbrook had to jack up all the shots because Paul George was just nilly-dillying around and just jacking up shots like it was a random Tuesday night game in 2026 Washington. You know what I'm saying? Tyrese Maxey is a baller. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to get at least 25 to 30 a game, but I think the Pistons are going to play him tough. You know what I mean? Because the Pistons have bodies on their team that could trample over Tyrese Maxey. It doesn't help that Tyrese is a small guard, albeit he is a very entertaining player, and I do think he is a superstar. I just think the Pistons have too much size for him. VJ Edgecombe is going to show his true rookie self, and that's okay because sometimes when you're a rookie in your first playoff series, sometimes it's just like, oh man, the lights are too bright, but it'll be a good learning experience for VJ. I don't expect much from him. But when it comes to Maxey, George, and Embiid, I don't trust Embiid's health. I don't trust PG's play. I love Tyrese Maxey. I think he'll be just fine. That being said, I do think they have the best chance if everything clicks and everything goes right. I do think they have the best chance to upset Detroit in the first round, and I don't even think that's possible with how Philly has played. In truth, this whole entire year, because the Philadelphia 76ers do not have floor spacing. I mean, Dominic Barlow, he's a good hustle guy, but he can't shoot the ball worth a lick. Quentin Grimes is a shot chucker. Kelly Oubre the same thing, even though he plays a little bit more defense than Quentin Grimes. And if we see any campaign minutes at all, and God forbid any Andre Drummond minutes, because I remember that bum didn't do jack diddly squat when he was on my Lakers in 2021, then yeah, I'm going to take back what I said, and I'll say that, yeah, Pistons are going to rout them in 5 games. If lucky, they could force it to a game 6, but at that point, I'm just asking for the world, right? But yeah, man, that's basically what I have to say when it comes to the Eastern Conference playoff matchups. I kind of gave it another day or two because I wanted to see if things officially shook up, and it did, with Toronto winning their ball game last night against Miami, and then Philly losing the last 2 games, and the Orlando Magic are starting to get hot too. They've won 3 in a row. So I want to see if things shook up a little bit because I do not want to jump the gun and just upload this video on like Monday night. So I gave it a couple days. I think this is the appropriate time to upload this video whenever y'all see this video. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think Detroit's all that in a bag of chips? Do you guys think Boston will win the chip? Do you guys think New York will come out of the East? And what do you think of all the playoff matchups I told y'all about? Do you guys think it'll be good? Do you guys think Detroit might get upset or whatever? I don't know. Whatever y'all thoughts are about this Eastern Conference, please leave it in the comments below. We're only 2-3 weeks away from series recap season 4. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to show y'all my face because I'm going to be doing a Zoom podcast where I go face to face with y'all, the viewers in here. But yeah, man, it's going to be very fun. Yeah, I hope y'all have a good day. That's it. That's the end of this video. I'm X. Deuces.